Hey everybody, how's it going? I just posted about, let me get rid of that. I just posted about probably 3 minutes ago on Twitter and LinkedIn that I was going to get started in about 5 minutes because that's what I set the timer to when I started streaming. But of course, it took me a while to post them. So I'm probably just going to waffle for the next 2 minutes or so to allow those who are still on their way to turn up. So the Claude Hackathon. I heard about this last Saturday, I think. And I thought, let's give it a try. I've been coding with Claude quite a bit. I'm going to turn this background music down just a little. Mostly just so it doesn't distract me so much. Yeah, I've been coding with Claude for quite a while now. As you can see on the screen here, I've got a template that I've started using for building new projects. I've been playing with the Ralph loop. So for those of you who are familiar with Jeffrey Huntley's Ralph loop concept, I was doing something similar to that before he started talking about automating it and doing it in like a bash loop. So just carried on going without human intervention. And I'm finding there's a lot of power in that. So what I wanted to do, I thought I'd submit. I would see whether or not I could be part of the hackathon. I was going to do the stream anyway, even if I wasn't let in. And then this morning I get an email. Oh, apparently Heather thinks I'm waffling. Yeah, I am. I like to waffle. Yeah, so I thought I'm going to stream about it anyway. This morning I wake up to an email from the Anthropic team saying, congratulations, you're in. I found out there were like 15,000 submissions. That's awesome for them. And here is, you can tell I didn't even check my message before I submitted. Here is, other than that space, here's exactly what I submitted when I filled out the form to ask what I was going to build. So I'm thinking about a budget tracker. I love talking about finance. If you have ever spoken to me about finance, you probably haven't been able to shut me up. I think there's a huge problem in terms of financial literacy when we come out of school, all of those kind of things. I love a good spreadsheet. So my wife will tell you that we manage everything through a spreadsheet. It's got lookup tables all over the place. And we've been thinking of building something to help people work out how to manage their finances better. And one of the problems I've always had is like that sinking fund idea of, I know that I'm going to have like my annual credit card bill is going to come out in September, and every year I pay for something or other. Sometimes there's things every other year. Annoyingly, in Australia, when it came to council tax, one of the payment options was 8 months throughout the year, but not evenly spaced. So I thought, let's build a tool that'll help us plan for a sinking fund, making sure we've always got enough money in an account somewhere to cover all the things we know are coming, and sometimes still hit us by surprise. So thinking of a budget tracker that helps you manage a sinking fund so you're never left short again. Have a monthly subscription. We all have those. An annual fee. Yep. Tax repayments for the next 22 months. How do we kind of factor that into an average monthly payment? Or a fortnightly paycheck. So can we do it fortnightly? So let's work out how much you need to set aside so you're always covered. So I don't actually know what the outcome of this is going to be yet. Some of the things that I'm thinking are maybe the tool is going to suggest you need a deposit of this amount in an account, and then you need to top it up by this amount every month or every fortnight or however often. It'd be interesting as well to see if we could maybe stretch this to be for people who have ad hoc income. Maybe you don't have a regular paycheck. Maybe you get you're part of the gig economy and you get ad hoc amounts in. How do you manage those kind of things? So we've got a week to build this. And there are some rules. I probably should have found the rules. Let's see if I can find them. So I think if I check over here, I'm going to keep some things off the screen, like API keys and the discussion that's going on in the hackathon space. But I think we should have some rules somewhere. Probably should have prepared this. Here we go. Bring that in over here. Hackathon details. And now I'm going to have to get an email. You can't see my screen yet. Oh, that's a good point. I should probably do that. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll do this while this thing. I'm really good at it. I'm really thinking about it. But let me just shouldn't be set. I tell you what, I had the audio coming in twice. Crikey. Alright, how about that? Let me know if the audio is better now. This is also the first time I've streamed in like 2 years, so I had to reset. It's a brand new laptop, well, it's a 7-month-old laptop, so I had to set everything up from scratch, trying to scratch the recesses of my brain, remembering how on earth I used to do this before. That works, excellent. Thank you for the real-time tech support. This is not working. Did it not like me? That's my email address. Sending login details. We have some rules that we have to follow, and there's also like 3 main things that they want you to try and hit, like targets or goals. Okay, I wonder whether there are a lot of people currently trying to get into the system. I've seen reports of Claude itself. Let's see if we can. All right, one step at a time, folks. I'm already getting ahead of myself. So here's a project that I've been working on. Basically, we're taking Next.js, Prisma for database, the Ralph technique, which I'll discuss more as we go through the streams. And I've turned this as a template, so if you want to use this yourselves, like I pushed something 14 minutes ago, I'll keep updating this to try and keep it up to date. And it's basically what I use across most of my projects nowadays. I did check with the rules. I asked a question in the channel itself on their Discord to say, hey, I know one of the rules is you have to start from scratch. You're not allowed to work on an existing project. Using a template, like a starter template like this, is fine as long as it's open source and freely accessible. The plan was always for this to be open source and freely accessible, so you go ahead and play around with this if you want. I'm going to use this template to create a new repository, and we're going to call this budget tracker. It's available. That's awesome. All right, let's create that repository, and then we can clone that locally. So we will grab this, and then I'm going to clone that into budget tracker. Go in here, and then we'll open code. All right. So we've got a bit of a head start in terms of how we're going to start developing this. If we have a look around, so I've got this Claude code. This is because of the fact that this is a template that helps you build products. We've got the Claude code, which tells you that this is a project template, autonomous AI building. We're using the Ralph technique. And then we've also got like the README, which tells you about the template system itself. So it's a starter template. I'm not going to worry about any of the MD files down here at the moment. We've got a bit of information about an architecture. This is how Ralph, or how this, the system of building software is architected. And then we've got information for agents to read. So if you're not familiar with Agents MD and Claude MD, the standard Agents MD is adopted by a lot of AI agents that will look at your source code. Claude still specifically wants you to look, it will look for a Claude.md file. Interestingly, there are some syntactic differences between the way you can talk to the different LLMs. Claude loves it when you really highlight something you wanted to do. Let's see if we can see an example in here. Can't see an example, but let's say we wanted it to really remember something. You must always. If you put this kind of wording in, then Claude's going to go, oh, this is really important. Other LLMs have a tendency to look at that and go, oh my God, they're shouting at me. Stop shouting at me. So it's important to know which LLM you're using for coding. I'm going to go with Claude, so we're going to do the shouty stuff. And then we don't have any specifications yet, but here's how it works. So we have a plan prompt. What we're going to do is we're going to build a whole load of specifications, and then we're going to run a loop which runs Claude code in that loop. And in fact, the first time for plan mode, it runs it once, and it'll take all your specifications and it'll turn it into an implementation plan. You can see here that it'll read the implementation plan if it already exists and then update it as well. So we can change our specifications and then run this again. So we'll be going through this a number of times over the next week. The plan for this stream is we're going to have a look at the thing we want to build. We're going to have a look at some of the rules, if I can get to them. And we're going to have a look at the... Still no email come through. Let's do a hard refresh on my mail. It's almost like they don't want to interrupt me or something. Anyway, we can probably look at the rules next time, but we're going to start working on the specifications today so that we can then run a Ralph planning session to build that implementation plan. And that'll probably be enough for the first stream. And then after that, we'll come back and we'll actually start running that loop and we'll see how it runs in the background. In fact, if we get to an implementation plan, I might finish the stream with starting the loop because that could take a while. The longest I've had a Ralph build loop work recently was like 4 or 5 hours in a row. And I'm sure you probably don't want to stick around for all of that. So we'll get to that point, then I'll stop the stream. I might stop. I'm hoping to take no more than half an hour on top of the waffle. Thank you for calling out my waffle. So anyway, let's get started. And of course, I'm not going to write any of these from scratch. We're going to use Claude. So let's open a terminal down here. For those of you who haven't, can you tell I go off on a tangent a lot? If you haven't seen happy.engineering, if you use Claude Code already, and you haven't heard of Happy Engineering, go to Happy Engineering. There's an app for Android and for iOS. And essentially what Happy is, it's a wrapper around Claude Code. So when I start Happy down here, using Claude Code from native installer, here we go. So I'm actually going to... I tend to have my terminal a lot larger nowadays and the coding area a lot smaller. But we have this down here. I can now, on my phone, come into Budget Tracker, and you can now see on my screen, hopefully, that I'm connected to this Claude Code instance. So if I just say hi, you'll see that coming up there. So now, okay, I know what that issue is. We'll come back to this in a second. But now, if I wanted to, I won't because I'm streaming for this. But what I've done for a lot of the other projects I'm working on is I'll get started on my laptop, and then I can walk away and I can carry on making sure that Claude's doing whatever it needs to be doing in the background without having to be at my desk. In some ways, get my credit card out of my pocket. It's digging into my side. In some ways, you can argue that maybe that's a bad thing because now we don't really get away from our desks anymore. But on the other hand, I found that I've been able to be as productive on the coding that I want to be while still present with family and friends. So I think it's a good thing. Your mileage may vary. Anyway, okay, so waffle. The issue here is that we don't have a .env file for starters. And when I run Happy for my particular situation, I actually pull in the .env file with an OAuth token. Oh no, this issue is different. The OAuth token is expired. Okay. Ignore that. Let's assume this is fine. Because we don't have a .env, that is definitely not the issue. So let me just go into login with my Claude account. Authorize that. We're in. All right. So now if I say hi, it should actually come back to me. Great. How can I help you with a budget tracker project? So let's just make sure in my preview that I'm not blocking you with my pretty face. So one of the things that I find really useful when I'm defining specs is be as descriptive as possible. The goal of this project is not just a budget tracker. Because we're part of a hackathon, it's also to hit certain goals, which I wish I could load up on their website. We'll come back to that. So I need to define the goals this is supposed to achieve in terms of a hackathon, but also what I want to get out of it at the end of the day. So what I'll do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to be very blunt and open. In fact, I wonder whether I can do it this way. I entered the Anthropic Claude Code Hackathon recently and was accepted to take part this week, full stop. Okay, I love the fact that it's double edit. I think because I'm playing music in the background and streaming it, maybe the text-to-speech isn't working so well. I entered the Anthropic Claude Code it's recently. Okay, let's say I entered the Anthropic Claude Code Hackathon. One thing you will notice is I'm going to typo a lot because I can't type and speak at the same time. But the thing that I love about LLMs is they don't care. So I entered the Anthropic Hackathon and was accepted to take part. Here's the proposal I sent, and then I'm going to paste that in. I want to develop a thorough set of specs for this and need you to help me define them. Then I'm also going to give some instructions to have a look at the current code base. So I'm going to say study. Study is a nice word. Sometimes you say look at this file or look at that. Study, for some reason, probably because study is harder than reading. Study for the reason that study is the right word, maybe. We'll look more in depth and really try and analyze what's going on rather than just understanding a particular document or a code base. It might try and infer things that are going on under the hood. So I find it a really good way of getting Claude Code to look at a repository. If I'm looking at a brand new repository for the first time, I might even just start my first prompt saying, study this repo, and then I'll hit enter and I'll let it go off and just dive in and find out what I can find out. So I wanted to study the README and Claude files to understand the shape of this template project template maybe. I also wanted to understand that we're going to build a Ralph loop. So we're going to use Ralph plan to convert the specs to an implementation plan. Again, typos, I don't care. And then use Ralph build to execute that plan. You can find more about Ralph at. I often find, if you're on a Mac, I don't know, maybe Windows does the same thing, I use text replacement a lot. So I've got one shortcut that is this text that I use a lot, and then I've also got Ralph loop, which is just a link to Jeffrey Huntley's Ralph repository. So you can find out more about Ralph at this URL. And then I'm going to grab this one that I had. I'm going to say, ask me questions, make this a conversation, use my responses to inform your next questions. So I want this to be interactive. Oftentimes, because the standard system prompt that starts, what is Ralph? Tell me, I will tell you. One of the things that the initial system loop for Claude Code, for example, which I found out the other day is 17K, which is quite large for an initial, but it sets up the scene for here's what Claude Code is before any of the context of like the source code and my text and any attachments, all of those kind of things goes in. There's a whole load of prompting that goes into defining what Claude Code is. So when that goes to the LLM, it processes and goes, okay, I know what I am. One of those things is usually, and you've probably heard this, you are a useful assistant. And in this case, it's likely to be something like you are a useful coding assistant. Sometimes you'll see one where you're a useful personal assistant that is able to help with things like travel planning and updating somebody's calendar. So it kind of starts and sets the scene by what kind of assistant you are. And one of the things that Claude Code's really good at is like getting started as quickly as possible. It wants to help you get to a finished solution, which in my experience is actually causing it's causing me to have to think really hard about what I ask it to do. In this case here, I'm saying make this a conversation because I want to slow Claude down. I don't want it to go off and say, okay, well, I'll build this for you, because we don't have enough of a specification yet. Sometimes when I've got the specification, I'll find that in the background it's actually started the implementation already. And I have to kind of rein it back in and say, whoa, undo all of the changes you've made in terms of coding. We're only doing specification at the moment. We still have to do the planning and then the implementation. Anyway, so let's get this conversation going and see where Claude goes. In the meanwhile, I will answer the question in the chat of what is a Ralph loop. So let's see if we can find. Let's go and have a look at this repo. How to Ralph Wiggum. I think there might be some diagrams in here. They're a little hard to see. All right, so essentially, what is a Ralph loop? Let me take this away and let me go in here so we can see what's going on. But I'll just take a second to go through what a Ralph loop is. So when we're coding at the moment, we've got a very interactive session going. If you've ever gone into deeper programming and you are finding bugs and you want to fix those bugs, or you think that something's been implemented well but not the way you expected, you're having this refining conversation all the time. And the way that we've been using generative AI for writing code up until like even 6 months ago was probably the earliest time that that's around the time that Jeffrey came up with the Ralph loop idea. He didn't really talk about it very publicly much until January, end of December, when he came out and made the big splash. That's when most of us heard about it. We've heard about things like Gastown. If you haven't heard about Gastown, have a look at that. If the Ralph loop is like the simple, smallest way of automating software development, Gastown is like it's polar opposite. It's chaos, but with structure. Anyway, have a look at Gastown if you're interested. I haven't started looking at that at all at the moment. I'm very happy with where the Ralph loop is taking me. Essentially, what it allows you to do is to define those specifications and then create the implementation plan. The idea then being is that the implementation itself is where the Ralph loop becomes magical. The implementation plan, when we define that, which we'll do in another session, will have atomic units of tasks to do. So say, for example, we want a budget app. So we want a way of uploading our statement so that we can then use an LLM to infer some kind of information out of that statement, like what are the recurring payments, how often do they happen, do we have any ad hoc but regular-ish payments, all of those kind of things. We need to be able to upload that into the system. So the one end of the spectrum, you could just say, I need to upload my bank statement into the system. That's not a very good specification because there's a lot of like vagueness in that. So when we come to the specification side of things, we probably want to be a bit more detailed. Like I want to be able to upload it as a PDF or as a CSV or as a spreadsheet. I want to be able to upload the file from my hard drive. Maybe we want to also be able to like upload it from a Google Sheet or some other kind of integration that way. So we're now breaking that specification down a little. But when it comes to the implementation plan, we want even more modular or atomic units of tasks, so that they can be very simple to complete. The idea then is that what the Ralph loop does is it'll start up an instance of Claude Code, and you can start a Ralph loop from within Claude Code, which means Claude Code is starting an instance of Claude Code which is different from subagents. Subagents are all within the same instance and they can communicate with each other. This is a whole Claude Code executable being started alongside the one that we're already running. And the prompt, if we have a look at the build here, the prompt will basically pull one and only one thing. Understand the task, implement the smallest thing that works. So it's going to have a look at this implementation plan. We'll be able to see what an implementation plan looks like soon. It'll pick one of those items, it'll try and complete that item, and then it'll exit. And the idea is that then we've got a bash loop that runs outside that starts the Claude again. And it'll keep restarting Claude. Claude exits, it starts again. And every time Claude starts, it starts with an empty context, so it's got none of the context drift and all of the poisoning and and the issues that we have when we get those long-winded conversations and it forgets what it was supposed to be doing. So it starts, it rebuilds its context from scratch, it looks at the code base, it looks at the implementation plan and says, okay, cool, I know where I'm up to, here's what I need to do next. Now here's where the other magic comes in, is we can, is it in this version? If the validation passes, if validation fails, we can basically do a checkout and undo the stuff we did. But also, there we go, add a note to the plan. So now the implementation plan becomes a living document. So to start with, it's a list of all the things that need to be done. And then one loop through Claude code might say, look, I tried to implement this. I didn't quite get it working because of X, Y, and Z. It'll then document that in the implementation plan. So the next time Claude starts, it's got that context of what went wrong before. And this is one thing that I'm noticing when I'm working with LLMs, is if I don't necessarily get the right response back that I want, and this is when I'm using it as something within my own applications. Let's say I'm using an LLM and I need some kind of structured response to come back. If it comes back with a structured response and I got it wrong, because after all, it's non-deterministic, it's not 100% going to get that structured response right every time. If instead of just repeating the request, which has an equal chance of giving me an invalid or an unusable response, if I give it the response it gave me, plus the results of the validation I did to make sure the response is right, and say, give me the same answer again, but this time formatted properly, the second time, almost 100% of the time, it does well. So clearing that context, the context window, so the /clear that you would normally use, and then passing this prompt in with the implementation plan, which is a living document that Claude will then update if it does something right or if it does something wrong, means that we can basically run this in a loop indefinitely until it's all done. I'm finding on average, if I set a maximum, the Ralph loop itself, you can specify a maximum number of iterations you want to do. I vary at the moment between infinite and 60. The other day I did 60 because usually there's been a lot of breathing room there and I don't want to go over 60 just in case, you know, it goes into a silly loop and uses up all of my credit. But it came to 50, and when I woke up in the morning, I'm like, I got pretty close. Like, it could have stopped before it was actually finished, and then I would have been annoyed because I would have had to wait longer. But the other thing that I've done in the Ralph loop, which is, I mean, not necessarily different to Jeffrey's original, but let's go back to build. We have this rule here. If validation passes, where is it? Sync environment, sync dependencies, implement the smallest change, read the plan. If there are no unchecked tasks remaining, so it's gone through the plan and everything is now done, there's nothing to build, signal the loop to stop. So if we touch this file here, then the next time Ralph tries to execute, it's going to come in and say, actually it's in loop. So there's this log file. The log file is defined as the Ralph lock. If that file exists, then it'll stop. And so now I can confidently start Ralph build in an infinite loop, knowing that once the implementation plan is done, it'll stop on the next time. So rather than doing the full 60, it'll just stop whenever it's done. I hope that's an understandable dive into what the Ralph loop is. We will go through actually using the Ralph loop. So stick around for the streams and get to see how it works in action, in practice. Where do you put the document in your project that Ralph uses and updates? So, I mean, you can put it wherever you want, because at the end of the day, Claude's going to look for them. I generally have a specs folder. And in fact, if we look at Claude, writing specs, create one markdown per feature in specs. So as I'm talking to, because I've asked Claude to look at Claude MD, Claude knows that it's going to create a specs folder. It tells you what a good spec is. It's user-facing, data model changes, edge cases, acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is important. Oftentimes we have a spec, I want this thing. Okay, how do we know that it's done? How do we know that it meets your expectation? One specification might be, I want a login page. Okay, is the acceptance criteria that somebody can log in? What about creating an account? Do they log in with an email address and password, or is it a social login? So all of these things become part of the acceptance criteria. There's an example of what the spec's going to look like. So we have an overview. We have the behavior, the data model, edge cases, acceptance criteria. And then there's a bit of information here for Claude to understand how Ralph is started and executed. We talk about the project structure here. The implementation plan goes in the root directory, and in fact, under plan, that will also specify to create an implementation plan. So in this first section, we should expect to see a specs directory created with a whole load of markdown files in there from our conversation. And then at the end of the stream, or just before the end of the stream, we'll run Ralph plan, and we should see the implementation plan created. All right. Let's get into this. So Ed wants to read the GitHub repository. Yep, I'm actually going to say yes and don't ask me again for GitHub. Oh, stop talking for a second, have some coffee. Yes, you can read that content. Alrighty, great concept. Syncing funds are one of those things that sound simple but have real nuance once you dig in. I've read through the project template and Ralph's approach. Specs go in specs, thank you. One per feature, focused on what, not how. Yep. Ralph will decompose them into atomic tasks. Let me start with a big picture and we'll drill down from there. First question, who is the user? Is it just a single user app? Great question. My goal by the end of the week is to have something that I can actually deploy into Railway or Netlify or something like that, and I want anybody to be able to use. So, single user, no auth needed, it's for personal use. At the end of the day, I want people to be able to deploy their own as well. There's the whole data privacy side of things. But for fun, let's make this a multi-user app. So I want this to be multi-user. Do you want authentication so multiple people can use it? Each user's data should be siloed. I don't want somebody logging in and seeing my data. I'm not going to have sharing. I think that's probably something... do we want to put sharing in? One of the things that I've been trying to do is learning how to say no more. Before generative AI helped me write code faster, I would really lock down that MVP, the minimal viable product. Like, what's the least that I need to do? And then chatting with an AI about the project, it says, hey, why don't we do this thing instead? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, that's so cool, let's do that. And then I have to remember that I'm just growing my MVP, so it's not minimal anymore. It's kind of a medium viable product. So for now, I'm not going to allow multiple people to log in and see each other's data. There are all sorts of complexities with that in terms of, like, if my wife and I could both log into the same account and see the household stuff, does she want to share, does she want me to be able to see information about her private accounts and vice versa? That's a complexity that I'm not ready to deal with. One of the features of the hackathon, though, is that if towards the end you decide to grow it and do more than you expected, let's see if we can get there. So the process is going to be, we're building specs today, then we'll start a build. The next stream we'll come back and we'll look at what was built, and then we'll just repeat that process. And as we go, the specs will grow, and the implementation plan will grow, and the code base will grow, and we'll just keep going through that process. So each user's data should be siloed. Is this personal budgeting? Could household couples share a single syncing fund? Yes. Oh, it is suggesting it, though. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think I should go for sharing a single... You know what? If a couple or household want to share a single syncing fund, then they can create one account and share the username and password. If they're happy to share their finances, they can share the username and password. Yeah, each user's data should be siloed. One account could be accessed by 2 or more people. If they're happy to share finances, they can share a login. And this now gives it a bit more context, that maybe when we produce the landing page before they've even logged in, or maybe it'll produce an FAQ. Like, what if we've got a shared account? How do we do that? Well, here's how you can do it. So we're giving it as much context as we can so that it can produce the best outcome. The more information it has, the better the guidelines, and there's guidelines and there's guardrails, but the better the guidelines, the better the result is going to be. For the next stream, I think I'll try and find some of these memes that I've been seeing that kind of describe the difference between vibe coding and vibe engineering, and I'm really enjoying the discussion at the moment in the community about spec-driven development is making a resurgence, because that's what makes generative AI development so I don't want to say there's certainty in it. Obviously, we're still working out some of the edge cases, but I'm having a much better experience using generative AI for development with really good specifications. The audience agrees, no sharing. No sharing unless you share logins, I assume. Anyway, that's my decision. I'm going to go with it. Specifications don't usually take me this long, but I also don't waffle to myself while I'm doing the specifications. This process can actually be, I mean, it is, for me at the moment, a lot of fun. But it's interesting to see where Claude will take you in that conversation. I've had many a conversation. I'm not trying to anthropomorphize Claude, but it is a conversation, I guess. I've had many a conversation where it's taken me in a direction where I've thought, well, this makes a much tighter product that's actually a better outcome. Sometimes it goes off the rails and says, have you thought about, I don't know, including ways of saving up for balloon flights to the moon or something ridiculous. Or maybe not. Anyway, let's talk about income. Got it. Multi-user with auth siloed data. No need for complex sharing permissions. If two people want to share, they can just share credentials. Keeps it simple. Your proposal mentions a fortnightly paycheck, but I want to understand the full picture. Great. Do users have just one income source, or could they have multiple? Salary, freelance, side gig, they could have multiple. So when I'm responding to an ordered list like this, I like to respond with that order list number, so that rather than having to answer in full, I can, to the extent it actually helps, because what am I reducing, like 50 characters, but I can keep the context window smaller, and then it also saves me with typing. So multiple income sources, yes, could be salary and freelance gig. If in the case of a couple sharing one login, there could be multiple salaries and multiple freelance gigs, and the salaries could be in different cadences and all sorts. So this needs to be very flexible. There could be multiple salaries, each on their own cadences, and multiple side gig income too. I mean, it might not even be side gig. Like maybe you've got an LLC, which is passed through finances, blah, blah, blah. There could also be LLC style pass-through income from a business. What else could there be? Rather than trying to categorize every single kind of income, because you know some people might also have child support and some people might have social benefits from their government, I think the key here is there can be multiple income sources, and some of them can be ad hoc and some of them can be on a certain cadence. So we shouldn't, in fact, let me put that in. Some people might also have social benefits, child support, etc. We shouldn't focus on the income sources, more the fact that there can be multiples and they could be on a regular cadence or ad hoc. There we go. Is the income amount fixed, same every time, or do you want to support variable amounts? Variable amounts. Even some folks on bi-monthly is horrible, because that could mean every other month. Even some folks on some folks who get 2 paychecks a month can have differing amounts. in each. I mean, the roughly and the exactly is what I was trying to get at. The reason why I'm pausing and thinking now is, in my mind, one of the ideas is that once we've got the statements that we can import, we can use an LLM to go through and detect things like, oh, this looks like regular income, or this looks like ad hoc income. In the case of where people get 2 paychecks a month and they differ slightly, maybe you get your expenses paid at the end of the month. We can say we know that they're roughly this amount. So I'm thinking that one feature will be for the tool to analyze bank statements and deduce, I was going to say infer, deduce is better, deduce the income cadences and sources and amounts. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. It's an ongoing conversation. 3, what pay frequencies should we support? Pay frequencies. We need to support what we detect. The system should support. How strange do we want to go? Like, it's unlikely that somebody's going to get paid every 12 days or something. At that point, is it maybe ad hoc with an average income? Like an average monthly? I don't know. The system should support, the system should, what's the word I used? Deduce this, and we can discuss this further. Sometimes it helps to say, look, I don't have a certain idea. Let's kind of drill in a little bit further. We can discuss server further as to whether we should what's the word I'm looking for? Sometimes I can't think of the word and I just describe it instead, but my brain's just blanked. So what I'm thinking is the system can look at what's currently going on and then map that. Some further as to whether we should map income cadences to a set of predefined understood frequency types, or whether we can simply convert an income source to represent an average income per time period. There we go. Maybe ad hoc gig work brings in on average X dollars per X days. Or maybe for really, so I'm thinking we probably want to look at the minimum amount. If I get on average $1,000 a month driving Uber, but one month I only make 800, I still need to be able to afford these things on 800. So maybe for really ad hoc style income, we need to work out a minimum expected per time period in order to never be left short. Right, so specifications. Specifications is where it's at. When we used to, before AI generated coding, we used to spend all of our time thinking about the code and kind of really writing tests and hopefully writing tests, and thinking about how the implementation happened. I haven't even started thinking about the implementation. Technically, I won't worry about the implementation very much during this project at all. But you can see that the amount of time and effort I'm putting into making sure that the intent that I have, or the thoughts that I have, are really fleshed out in detail, is going to give the LLM a lot better chance to create code that, well, an implementation plan first, and then the code from that, that will meet the mark to 98% certainty. There's always going to be a little bit of a gap, because I don't know everything I need to tell it, and it doesn't know everything that it needs to ask me. And there's always going to be a gap, but it's going to get pretty close. And then at that point, we can either refine the specs and re-implement, or do that process over again. Or we can even sometimes do a little bit of hand-holding and spend maybe half an hour to an hour just having that real-time conversation and monitoring the changes as we go, and kind of refining the solution, the implementation, and then we can backport the changes we've made back into the specifications. I've done that a little bit as well, but we'll see how it goes for this week. This is Rich, thanks. So the system, I love how much it wants to make me feel like I'm great. So the system is really about pattern detection, not just a form where you type in. Absolutely, it's not just a form where you type things in. The bank statement analysis is a core feature, not a nice to have. Totally. That raises a design question we'll come back to. The bank statement import pipeline is a big piece of work. Sure is. We should probably spec it as its own feature. Absolutely. Now let's talk about the other side. Okay, that moved on quickly. I guess it'll come back to me on that. Expenses and obligations. Your proposal mentions monthly subscriptions, annual fees, and tax repayments over 22 months. Those are three quite different patterns. That's the idea. Recurring indefinitely, recurring within an end date, and one-off future expenses. Are all three of these in scope? Yes, all three in scope. And I'm also going to tell it about the Australian council tax issue that I had when I lived in Melbourne. There's also another one which is quite annoying. In Melbourne, when you pay council tax, you can pay in one lump sum, or you can spread out in payments over the year. But it's not equal payments every month. I think they do it in 10 payments. One each month from, I can't remember exactly, I'm going to go from September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June to June, with the first 9 being 1/10 of the amount due, rounded to the nearest dollar. I know this is crazy. And the 10th being the remainder. I know, this is crazy. Let's see what it thinks of this one. It's a perfect example of real-world messiness and a tool like this needs to handle. Yes, and I bet Melbourne council tax isn't the only bill. I'm sure it isn't. So that gives us a fourth pattern. Recurring indefinitely, recurring with an end date, one-off transactions, and customer irregular schedule. Known amounts on known dates, but not a clean pattern like a council tax. On detection versus manual entry, should expenses also be deduced from bank statements like income? I'd imagine some can be detected, others can't. What I would like is for it to detect potential things that it should track and provide them as a suggestion to add into my list of expenses and obligations. So a mix of detected and manually entered. They would definitely be manually entered. So I would like the system to detect potential candidates for expenses slash obligations, and offer them in a UI form that allows me to approve, to formalize, to accept them into the official list of expenses and obligations, potentially with an option to modify or to tweak the entry before it's saved. And yes, we need to create them manually. I would like a natural language input mechanism to describe the expense / obligation and payment, what was it calling it? Pattern. Love it! I'm so glad you love it. So, bank statement analysis feeds a suggested expense queue that the user reviews and accepts or tweaks, plus manual entry with natural language input like council taxes this much a year, temp payment September to right. But if I could type it in exactly like that, that'd be great. Yes. Natural language parsing turns that into the structured data the system needs. It'll be fun to play with that one later. As I mentioned before, I was having some fun issues with that on Braidflow to try and get structured data back. Some of the latest models, OpenAI and Anthropic both have released models that come with a flag to guarantee / ensure a compliant JSON response. So maybe that's the way it'll take us. But I'm not going to make any implementation decisions at this point. The big one, sinking fund calculation itself. This is the core value prop. Let me make sure I understand the mental mode. Given all of your known obligations and all of your known income, the system calculates how much you need to set aside from each pay cycle so that when each bill comes due, the money is there, correct? A few questions. Where does the money live? This is purely informational. Is this purely informational, tells you to put X aside, or does it track an actual sinking fund balance that you top up and draw down? I think we just need informational. Like, we're not connecting to actual bank accounts. You could upload your statement for it to be able to monitor that. In the future, maybe you could connect to a bank account, but I don't know, if we have the time by the end of the week and we find a way of doing that, then sure. But for now, I think informational is going to be fine. So 1, informational. The user can self-verify. And then we don't need to worry about where that account is. Is it in a bank? Is it in a under the pillow, under the mattress? What happens when you're short? If income doesn't cover all the obligations, how should the system communicate that? Just a warning, or should it suggest prioritization? I want to know what it means by that, because if we have the information on the screen, your account should have this much in it and you should put this much into it on this date, put X dollars aside, then I know I'm short already. So given we're just providing informational feedback in 1, what does this question ask? What happens when you're short? I would be able to see that I'm short on the bank balance or short on income. How would this system having any input / functionality around this help? And I don't want to shut it down. I don't want to say, oh yeah, right, there was an overreach or anything like that, which can sometimes happen. So I want to still give it an opportunity to say, well, this is what I was thinking. I'm open to feature ideas to make this product great. Can you help me understand your thinking? And I always try to avoid putting thinking in quotes. Thinking. Should it handle multiple funds? One pot for subscriptions, one for annual bills, one for tax, or is it one big sinking fund pool? That's a great question. In my mind, for me personally, I just want one pool. Although, that said, in my actual life, I suppose my fake one, we do actually have one for monthly subscriptions and then one for annual and ad hoc-y kind of things. And the way we do the annual one at the moment for something that's every 2 years is we put it down as being every year, and then every year that we don't have to pay it is kind of like a bonus to ourselves, but that's inefficient. And for tax, some people might actually want a separate account for tax, because that's how you make sure you can pay the tax money. So I want this to be optional. This to be optional. Whether the app allows this to be, whether the app does this. What I'm trying to think is, I want this to be optional. What I'm thinking, and I'm getting a little bit of into implementation process at the moment, because what I'm thinking is, let's say that we just have 3 accounts, and in our settings we can say, well, you know what, there's the subscription, annual bills, and tax. They're 3 separate accounts, but me personally, I just want one for subscription and one for everything else. So what I can do in my preferences is I can say these 2 are actually stored in one account, and now I can report that as here's what you need in that one account and here's what you need to put into that one account. So functionally under the hood, it can always be treated as 3 separate types, but I can then group those in the interface. So talking that through probably helps me with this. I want this to be optional. I don't want to focus on implementation too much now, but it would be feasible to structure this as separate accounts under the hood, and then allow a user in their preferences to group 2 or more funds into one account. For example, I might have one account for monthly subscriptions and one bank account, specifically putting a bank here so it knows I'm talking about a place where I put the money as opposed to a conceptual place that we're just reporting on. I might have one bank account for non-monthly recurring / future expected expenses. Good pushback on point 2. Thank you. Pride myself on pushing back. Let me explain my thinking. If I earn $4,000 a month, what was question 2 again? What happens when you're short? Okay. If I earn $4,000 a month and my obligation totals $4,500 a month with sinking fund contribution, the system knows I have a problem before my bank balance does. That's true. The value would be early warning. Yes. At your current income and obligations, you will be $500 a month short. It's a forecast, not a balance check. But you're right. This might just be obvious from the dashboard. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it would be nice to have a dashboard saying, here's your average monthly outgoing. I mean, technically, from this perspective, it's not a monthly obligation. My obligation, like if this is the amount of money I need to put in for future obligations. So this is not my, I guess when it says obligations, maybe it means the, what's the wording it used? The amount that we need to put in. Mentioned it near the top, right? I like to use its wording back on itself because then it can kind of tie those things together. What am I missing? think my brain's skipping over the word every time, but I'm going to call it contributions. So let's make sure we're looking at the monthly contributions to the funds required for future costs, not necessarily, I think that's correct, not necessarily the quote monthly obligation in terms of expenses. Just a point of differentiation. So yes, in the dashboard we could see total monthly top up of X dollars and total monthly income, or maybe this would be average minimum monthly income of Y, and we could make it obvious to the user if these are upside down. Is that a colloquialism? If X is greater than Y. And it says, do you want to keep it simpler? How would you imagine this in a less simple way? What's the I'm trying to think, like, if we did something more complicated, what's the benefit to the user? How can we make this great? Again, what's the benefit to the user could be interpreted as, I think you're wasting your time, we're going too far. So how can we make this great? Again, like, I'm open to suggestions. We've been going for about an hour and a bit so far. I think we're probably pretty close. But like I promised, like, I'm not going to do anything that isn't live streamed. So I'm just going to keep going here. I've got a meeting in a couple of hours, but we'll definitely be done by then. It's about the contribution to future readiness. Oh, I like that, future readiness. Not the raw monthly burn. Here's what I think the real magic is. A monthly average hides timing problems. Okay, say your required top-up average is, your required top-up is that. Looks fine against 4,000, but in June, car rego, insurance, and domain renewals all hit for the same week. You only started saving 3 months ago. Okay, so this is what I was going to before. Do we need to have a lump sum in there first? What do you need? Forward cash flow projection. Crunch alerts. Right, so this is a larger question now. Do we make this a, you need to seed your funds with A and top up every B days, weeks, months with C dollars? Or can we create a, like a ramp up or a ramp down up / ramp down method of you need to, oh, just while I'm thinking about this, maybe a hybrid. We ask, how much can you contribute? How much do you already have in your fund? And how much disposable liquid cash do you have? And maybe that's in how much can you top up the fund maximum per period? See, if we get a better idea of where they're at, then we can, instead of saying to them, you need this much now and then you top up by this much, we could say you don't have enough in there at the moment, but if you top up slightly more than you need to, then by the time you get to this point, you'll have the money and then you can drop down to this much. So you need to top up by more for period time, and then can drop to lower amount after that time. Maybe a hybrid, we ask this. Maybe we don't propose / ask until we have enough. Or maybe some of these questions can be asked for manual input or inferred if they upload statements. They should always be editable, tweakable. All right. There's a core differentiator right here. Most budgeting tools give you the flat save this forever. Yours would say you have $500 in the fund and $1,200 in car rate. You're hitting at 8 weeks. Top up $400 a fortnight for the next 4 pay cycles. Then you can drop to $280 a fortnight ongoing. It's adaptive. Contribution amount changes. So the system needs to know 3 things to give smart advice: current fund balance, what's already saved, available capacity, max you can contribute, and the obligation timeline. Yes. And from those, it calculates contribution schedule, not just a number. Yes. This makes me think about onboarding as a crucial spec. First time experience needs to gather enough useful info, enough to give useful output quickly. Which brings me to my question: what's the minimum viable first session? Imagine someone opens this for the first time. What's the fastest path to value? I can see a few options. Upload a bank statement, system detects patterns. Answer a few questions manually. Both paths available, user picks. Related, do you want, so I'm going to pick both paths. Do you want the bank statement upload to be the primary onboarding path, or more of a power feature you discover later? Statement uploads needs to have equal visibility over manual entry. Some people won't feel comfy uploading that. Some will like the convenience. Makes sense. 2 equal front doors. Let me shift to 2 bank statements for a moment. This is a meaty feature and I want to scope it right. Format support. CSV is universal. OFX, QIF are common bank exports. PDF statements exist but are a nightmare to parse. Which formats are you thinking for V1? Just CSV or more? I think we can stick with CSV to start with, but I would like to see how Opus 4.6 works on the PDF statements. I don't think it's going to be the nightmare. I think the reason why Claude is saying this is, and you'll see this often, like if I asked it to tell me how long it would take to build this, it would say like 3 months. Because what it's doing is it's using a context that it has from what it's learned from all the information from the web that it's analyzed or the model's been trained on. And it knows that a standard software engineering team would take months to build this. Sometimes I'll get to a point where it's asking a question and it'll say, hey, this is a big lift. And I tell it to do it anyway, and 12 minutes later it's done. Because it's not thinking from a perspective of how hard is it for an LLM to do this. I think PDF statement, in fact, maybe I'm just going to go for it. 1. I think PDF statements used to be a nightmare, but parsing with Opus 4.6 should make this easy. All right, let's challenge it. Hold my beer. Privacy storage. Once the system has analyzed the statement and extracted the patterns, do we keep the raw statement data or extract what we need and discard it? This matters for user trust, especially since you notice some people won't be comfortable uploading. So part of me is thinking, do I keep it for now? Because then we can use that to make the system better. It can kind of learn from itself. But we can just upload them. Privacy is important. Keep only as long as needed. And 3, ongoing imports. This is a one-time onboarding thing, or do users regularly upload new statements to keep the system understanding current? Upload your latest statement and we'll update. So ongoing uploads, and because it's Claude, I can shout. We must make sure that we don't do double entry. If I upload the same PDF, or I have a CSV with running list of transactions and upload it completely every time, we must not create duplicates. So the interesting thing here, we should try and look for like identifiers or like transaction IDs to help us with the edge case where someone might pay the same vendor the same amount twice on the same day. Or maybe you can think of other strategies. See, another strategy I'm thinking of is if we have like an uncertainty at the edge boundary. If I've got a spreadsheet, for example, that's got everything from today back, and I spent $5 on a coffee, and then after this I go out and I buy another coffee, and then tomorrow I upload the spreadsheet, and now I've got 2 in there, is it going to think that's a duplicate? But in like 5 days time, those 2 will still be on there. So when I upload at that time, it's like, oh no, there's definitely not a duplicate because it's in the spreadsheet twice. So there might be other strategies, such as confirming duplicates in once a future. No, I'm not going to give it any ideas. It's too much implementation. All right, that does change the game. Well, that changes everything. On deduplication, transaction IDs are ideal, but not always present. A layered strategy would work. Transaction ID if available, composite fingerprinting, data mount, description, account, hashed catches most duplicates. Fuzzy window. The flag near matches for user review rather than silently deduping. Protects the paid the same vendor twice on the same day case. The key is, when in doubt, ask the user rather than the guest. Sure. Now let's talk about the natural... See, to do this kind of thing, if I had to architect this and write the software myself, it's not impossible. We've seen this before. But the amount of... like, I envisage, and we will see when it actually does it, I envisage this being relatively straightforward-ish for Claude to be able to develop this. It's going to be fun to see how this pans out. And here again, we're going into it's expanding the specs beyond what I anticipated. But in this case, these are some things that are like key to making the application more usable. Let's talk about natural language input you mentioned earlier. You want users to describe expenses in plain English. Is natural language input just for creating expenses and obligations, or also income? Sure, income too. Can I say change my Netflix to $24.99 or push car retro to August conversationally, or is natural language just for initial creation with a traditional form for edits? I was thinking initial creation. Let's allow editing. Let's see how it does. We're going to push this as far as we can. Get as much into this by the end of the week. How prominent is the primary... Oh, is the primary input method a chat style input box front and center, or an alternative along traditional forms? User experience and user interface. Part of me thinks maybe it looks like a chat in the corner. Chat with whatever the chatbot's called. Part of me thinks there's some really interesting new ways of integrating this into the process. And maybe I'll just allow it to work that out. I was imagining a chat bubble type interface like live support, but I'd be interested in any new/ingenious ways of integrating the AI UX into the user interface. Perhaps do some research into ways others are doing this. Beyond chatbot, inline AI input UI design patterns. Lightweight specifically looking at fintech. It is an interesting product vertical to engage with. Oh, I want to search. Focus, Benjamin. Alrighty. Here's what I found. Beyond the chat bubble, there are some interesting patterns worth considering. Inline contextual AI. Think Notion/commands. When you're looking at an expense entry, you could type slash. I don't think I want people learning a new typey interface for this. Smart nudges. Proactive suggestions surfaced in context, not in a chat. Like a subtle card on the dashboard, we noticed a new $14.99 monthly charge from Spotify starting January. Add it. I think that's nice. I don't feel like that's the conversation. So let me just start making some notes. What was the first one? I don't think users should learn new input commands. But maybe we can have a put in a sparkle button on an entry that pops up a modal that asks what would you like to do, with maybe some prepared responses and a free text option. Yeah. 2 was smart nudges. Smart nudges aren't conversational, but I like the concept. A bit like LinkedIn's new connections, there would be a link to see all, what was it calling them? Something like that. Hybrid approach, a persistent but collapsible AI input, like a command bar at the bottom or a floating pill that works globally. Type anything. What's my biggest expense? This feels like the live support thing, but it's just in a draggable 3. This sounds like live support, except I can drag it around the screen. I like that idea. It can collapse to the bottom right again, but can be moved out of the way of things the user wants to see. My suggestion, combine 2 and 3. Yeah, I still like 1. Well, I like my version of 1 with a modal. Although, what's the advantage of 1 if I've also got 3? Your item sparkle, contextual, discoverable, what you like to do, relatively clean. It's 3 complementary interaction modes that each serve a different moment. I'm just going to revisit this and say, is it too much for the UXO, or can we make it easy to use still? Alright, what else does one want to know? Now the dashboard. I have some thoughts, but I want to hear yours first. What's the first thing you want to see when you log in? Some possibilities. The number. Set that aside. The time. The chart. Health check. Are you on track? The list. All your obligations laid out with next due dates. For the dashboard, I don't actually care at the moment. I want to use your recommendation. Base this on what users are likely to want to see up front. And then ask me if you have any clear uncertainties. And at this point, my brain is getting to the point, like, I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about this, and it's like we've been going for, where is my timer? I don't even know where it is anymore. An hour and a half. And I'm getting itchy now. Like, I want you to start building, or at least creating that implementation plan. So my answers are starting to become a lot less opinionated and more, what do you think? Because I want to get to the point where it'll do the implementation plan, we can start a build, and then we can start refining from there. It doesn't think it's too much because they're not 3 competing modes. That's fine. Dashboard recommendation, top to bottom. Hero card, what's next? Single most important thing to do. Great. Health bar, timeline chart, upcoming obligations, suggestion badge. One uncertainty. Do you want the dashboard to support multiple funds from day 1, or start with a single fund and view and add multi-fund later? It affects the dashboard layout. Are we going with multiple funds under the hood and linking them in preferences, or assigning them, linking them to a, I was going to say, or linking them to a bank account, but I don't want to start thinking about bank account linkage. If not, and we're creating extra funds, how do we deal with the user wanting to restructure later? It affects the dashboard layout. Multiple funds, the hero card and health bar need to show combined view, or let you switch between funds. We create literal separate funds. The user decides, I want a subscriptions fund and an annual expenses fund. They set them up, assign obligations. 6 months later, they want to restructure to merge the 2 funds. Now we're migrating balances, reassigning obligations, calculating history. It's messy. Yes. If every obligation has its own fund under the hood, each obligation has its own running tally of how much is being set aside for this. The user never sees the 47 individual funds, they see groups. In preferences, they say, show me these obligations as one account called monthly subs, and these, yeah, restructuring becomes just retagging, no balance. Exactly. It's actually broken it down into 1 fund per item, rather than the 3 that we were talking about before. I like that. The math doesn't change. Recommendation per obligation tracking, yes. Does that model work for you? Yes. If so, I think we've covered enough. Thank you. Yes, this is perfect. So now, it should start creating our specifications. Let's see. And at this point, I'm either going to, like, we'll give it a couple of minutes and we'll see how it goes. I could stop the stream at that point and then we'll come back and we'll revisit the specs and then we'll start our first implementation plan creation. Let's map out. So once user and auth, onboarding, income sources, expenses, obligations, bank statements, all of these. Yep. Auth approach, simple email password, magic link, what feels right for a hackathon entry. I think, like, I'd like to get the auth in later, but things like Google, I've got to set up a Google app and linking. So I think simple email password, magic link. Some people like them, some people hate them. It always annoys me having to go and wait for the email to come in. So I'm going to do simple email password. Ordering. These have natural tendencies. You need to auth before anything. You need income expenses before the engine works. Should I define the dependency chain or does Ralph handle sequencing from the plan? Natural tendencies. You need to auth before anything. We should do we have a specification for that, or is that an implementation thing? I think we need to specify it. We should specify a user flow diagram, probably in Mermaid. If you haven't looked at Mermaid, Mermaid is a way of diagramming in Markdown, and LLMs understand it very well, and also means it's something we can render and see. So dependency chain, does Ralph handle sequencing from the plan? Yeah. I feel like that goes, that, I don't know. Scope check. All 10 in scope of the hackathon. Should we flag some as stretch goals? All in scope. I think if it starts generating now, I'll just switch into auto accept edits. If it starts creating files now, then I might just call it well, maybe not a day. I might jump on again later. Might call it for this stream. Before I draft the specs, let me fill in the remaining gaps. We have gaps. What if modeling? We mentioned this but didn't dig in. Concretely, how do you see this working? Is it a separate page mode where you create hypothetical scenarios? Or is it integrated on any expense? You can toggle what if I remove this and the timeline chart updates live. Can you save scenarios or compare them side by side? Huh. You know, I don't know. Maybe my brain's a little frazzled. I don't know that I remember reading about that during this conversation. But I like it. I like it very much. Is it a separate page or mode where you create hypothetical scenarios, or is it an integrated, e.g. on any expense you can toggle what if I remove this and the timeline chart updates? Can you save scenarios or compare them side by side? Yeah, my brain is definitely slowing down. So I am going to say I have no opinion on this. I feel like it would be nice to have a toggle on each expense. And you can tell what the time chart updates and see a actual versus scenario. What was it called? Timeline chart. Or summary. We need a way to, we don't need a way for, what do you think? I like it, keep it simple. Toggling expense off. No separate page, no save scenarios, just immediate visual feedback, a reset button. I was going to suggest that, and I thought of it already. Toggles all back to reality. Maybe the timeline shows actual as a solid line and scenario as dashed line. Nice! This keeps it lightweight. A few more quick ones. Oh, please. Desktop first or mobile first? Hackathon judge might be on a laptop. Budget app screams. Both. Responsive. Responsive first. Pay cycle awareness. The hero card says set aside 412 your Friday paycheck. Does a simple system need to know when your next pay is to time that message, or is it just per cycle without knowing the exact date? Does it need to know when your next pay cycle is? Won't it know this from the schedule, or are you thinking about ad hoc income? Ad hoc income. Currency, single currency per user, multi-currency for Hackathon, single currency. Maybe allow user prefs to set currency symbol. And historical tracking. Once you top up your fund and bill gets paid, does the app track that over time? Like you've been on track for 4 months, or you were short in March, or is it purely forward-looking? Historical is a great idea. Another small detail. For regular incomes known as zero, are thinking about the ad hoc case. If somebody has irregular gig income with no predictable next date, the hero card can't say from your Friday pay. We need to say something like set aside 412 from your next income, or just show the per cycle amount. Maybe it needs to say you need to set aside X dollars by date. Small detail worth handling gracefully in dashboard spec. Sure, I think we have enough to start drafting the app in one paragraph. A multi-user syncing fund tracker. Users set up income sources via financial obligations, recurring, time-limited, one-off, or custom schedule, either manually or via natural language input, or by uploading bank statements for AI-powered detection. The system tracks a virtual fund per obligation, calculates adaptive contribution amounts per pay cycle with ramp up and ramp down, and presents a forward-looking timeline projection. A dashboard shows the next action, fund health, projected balance over time, and upcoming obligations. Inline what-if toggles let users explore scenarios. AI interaction happens through a floating draggable bar, per item sparkle buttons, and a suggestion feed for detected patterns. Anything missing? That's great. Let's go. What you doing? Hopefully you'll start writing specs. I don't want to miss any part of this for the stream. Get it all in there. But if it does start doing specs now, then that's where I'm going to wrap up. Because I want to let you all go. I want to let me go so I can get some lunch and get some of my other work done. There's a lot of tokens. There's a lot of thinking. Come on, just tell me you're creating things. Show me a spec directory. Show me some kind of progress towards the goal. I'm going to hazard a guess that given that it's been going for a minute and a half, it's about to start creating a whole load of documents. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap this stream up here. I'm going to not do anything else unless it comes up with a, like, am I allowed to create this file or those kind of things. I'm not going to touch this again until I start streaming. I might do that later tonight. Otherwise, it'll be tomorrow morning. Keep a track. I will add into the comments. Oh, Question, do I have any of the thought processes of the LLM viewable? I don't. So you can press Control O, which will give you the output. And you can press Control T, which will, I don't have any, it'll give you the list of tasks. But it's not showing me what's going on under the hood. 2 minutes of thinking, it's doing something more than just, hey, let's respond to this guy. So I'm pretty convinced that it is currently building up in its context the files that it's going to create. And then once it has that context, that's the point at which you can then return that to Claude Code. So what's happening under the hood at the moment, in my imagination, I guess, is the Opus 4.6 LLM on Anthropic server is building a big context with one of the spec files. It's then going to return that to the Claude Code application with an instruction saying, hey, create a file in this location with this content, at which point Claude Code, the application, will do that. And then it'll send a message back to the LLM saying, okay, I've done that, what's next? And then I'll send the next file. So that's probably what's going on at the moment, which is why it's taking a little bit of time. So yes, I'm going to wrap up. I'll stream again tonight. I mean, it's 2:44 p.m. here. I'm Central Time, US. So when I say tonight, maybe in 6, 7, 8 hours, I might jump on and just do a quick update of where we got to. With ideally what I'd like to do before the end of today is get that implementation plan built. And then let me write all 10 specs now. Great, there's the specs directory. So I'll get that implementation plan built, and then we can run the Ralph build while I'm sleeping. And then tomorrow morning we can come back and we can see what's built. We can give that a try, and then we can refine the specs, do some debugging, all of those kind of things. But like I mentioned on LinkedIn and on Twitter, I will not be working on this unless I'm streaming. So you won't miss a thing. I want to make sure that you get the full dirty behind the scenes, everything that goes wrong, everything that goes right. And let me just bring that up so you can have a look in the background what this is looking like. Okay, our flowcharts and our behavior, and it's nice. So yes, I'm going to leave this to go. I'm going to, I'll be posting on Twitter and on LinkedIn when I go live. So feel free to follow me there. Follow me on YouTube, hit that subscribe link. I always giggle when I see people on YouTube saying this. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that bell notification, all of those kind of things. So then you know when I go live again. Thanks for hanging around, and I shall see you in the next one.